All right, thank you all for joining today. So this is our second product update webinar of the year, and this is going to be looking at specifically Revizto 5.9, 5.9.1 now. And you can see there on the screen the kind of major points we're going to talk about. Searching sheets by content, 3D model viewer improvements, 3D camera share is back, clash automation updates, and some other quality of life type updates. Now, just as a general point, what we're really doing with this release is we're continuing the improvements to the overall user experience, and we are responding to our customers' needs. You know, the things that we've been hearing over and over again, we've built in features around that, and we're also strengthening some of those core tools, particularly in the Revizto Plus side of things. So let's dive straight into a bit of a demonstration on some of these features. Firstly, searching sheets by content. How do we do it? Well, the first thing to do is make sure you've got that 5.9.1 update installed. When we view the sheet list, you can see here there's a tick box for search content. So if we're doing a normal search, you know, it's only going to search across the file names as it did before, the file number and name. Whereas if we want to search inside the sheet for actually what, you know, is appearing, you know, the text written on sheets, we tick the box here for search content. Now, if it's the first time we've kind of done this, we will get a little warning that says, hey, do you want to index your sheets? That means Revizto is going to read through them, so it's able to search that content. And then we can now start searching for specific bits of text on top of those sheets. So if I search for 420.B1 and then open up one of these sheets, what it's done is it's found any of the sheets that basically have that fragment of text on it. And if we, you know, increase the detail there, it's now going to find it, and it's also going to highlight it in yellow. So it helps us really focus in on things like mark numbers, you know, door numbers, room numbers. So when I've searched for that fragment of text there, 420.B1.35, I can now go to any of these drawings, and, you know, I can kind of be confident that, you know, that room is visible there. So it's opening up a lot of potential, particularly for site teams, to be able to access information about things they're interested in, you know, the scope of work that they're doing right now. So we could even use things like some of these codes in here, FL-FV4, for example. So FL-FV, we can see it's found the floor finish details. And if we open up those, it actually highlights them. So it's now actually taking us to detailed views that kind of relate to that floor plan that we're looking at. So this is going to really improve our ability to get through those documents, the 2D drawings, and find what we're after. And of course, as with anything in Revizto, if there's some issue with this, some problem, we could immediately go and grab a stamp, something to do with the architectural design, and drop the issue there on the drawing to raise the issue. So we recommend, you know, that everybody does install that latest update, index their sheets, and then we could increase awareness inside of our teams, particularly for using this feature on the iPad. As you walk around on site looking for a certain asset, a certain door number, a certain product code, just jump in there and use that search content option for your sheets. We'll now have a look at, in 3D, some of the improvements we've made just in the general model viewing space. Now, the first one to kind of think about is, as Revizto is getting more and more full-featured, you know, as you know, we've got a ribbon here. We can click the icon to kind of switch between a basic ribbon and an advanced ribbon. But as we get more and more tools, we have this kind of effect where things start to clutter the screen a little bit, don't they? Now, the kind of default layout that I've got there is pretty much what I would use on a normal kind of single monitor setup. I've got kind of properties on the right, search sets and object tree on the far left, then appearance templates and viewpoints, and then clash automation perhaps running there in the middle, so we can actually look at our clashes. Now, the actual amount of the kind of 3D view is kind of pretty reduced, right? So what if I want to work in 3D a bit better and kind of clear away these dialogues? That's what this icon here at the top right, minimize, maximize, does. So let's just for the full effect, let's say I want to look at all my clashes at level 11, tick the box here. Maybe I'll isolate them. So I've got a nice view there, but it's still a bit too compact. So then I could just go like this, click this icon there at the top right. Now I've got kind of just the clear kind of 3D view. Could even do things like zoom to fit to get in closer. I could do a proper, nice walkthrough. Imagining we're in a coordination meeting or a design meeting. We're on the full screen. So we're looking at things, we're talking about them. We can still raise issues like right now. So we could kind of go grab a stamp, raise an issue or whatever we want to do. But then what if I want all my dialogues back? At the top right there, I click the icon and that will then bring back all of the dialogues that I had previously set up and in the configuration that I had them. So it's a bit like having one kind of default set or state of the actual views or the dialogues, and we're able to kind of minimize and maximize. The other thing this would be useful for is if we're doing like perhaps a kind of quantification exercise, maybe we're exporting our structural columns. So I've selected 2000 columns there with the search set, and I could go into my selection inspector, and maybe I would want to even pull that all the way across like this and actually, work with the data view, right? I can, of course, if I want to go to this particular column, I could click on the arrow there to zoom to it, but now I can no longer really see it. So then I could just punch my minimize button there at the top right, have a quick look, I can see that specific column that I've zoomed to, and then I could bring my dialogues back again with that icon. So that's going to open up a lot of kind of more fluid 3D centric reviews where the Revizto dialogues can be pushed out of the way and then pulled back again. So definitely test that one out on your end, that minimize, maximize option. Now we also added some enhancements to our appearance templates. So as you know, the appearance templates are really powerful for changing the kind of color profile, visual profile to the view. So in this project, we've got one here called structural steel only, which would isolate just my fabrication steel. We've got one here called design versus fabricator steel. We've also got one called discipline colors. So we've got a number of different kind of visual profiles there. But what if we wanted to kind of join or merge some of our appearances together? So I've gone to this one here, this white appearance profile, for example. Now, what I could do is I can go to the bucket and I can actually see there, all it's doing is it's overriding the color of everything to white, this particular one. And what I can do is I can take one of the other profiles and I can right click on it and go add to 3D. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the rules from that appearance template and add it to the active rules there that we've got on the screen. So I'll do that now. We'll go add to 3D. And what the kind of second set did was it just hit off my kind of existing phase. So that's what that particular example has done. We could do another example. Maybe we'd go discipline colors. So we've got it colorized by discipline, but then I take my white one and add that to 3D, which then kind of overrides everything back to white because that one's just a white override. So this is not a dynamic link. So just keep that in mind. It's not like we're stacking appearance templates and it updates when the original updates. What we'd have to do here is we have to go then save as a new appearance template, and we'd call that services isolated in white, perhaps. So we've essentially used the feature to build a new appearance template that has a combination of other rules. So strategically, what you should think about is what's the minimum number of kind of appearance templates I need to build initially? Maybe it's a colorization and maybe an isolation and something else. And then let's start mix and match to create additional ones using this right-click add to 3D option. All right, another exciting one is that camera share is back. So if some of you, have used Revizto for quite a while, particularly since version 4, we had a feature called camera sharing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try pull up 2 kind of Revizto windows on 2 different machines. So the way it works is you have multiple people inside a project at a certain moment in time, right? So if I click on this project here, and at the top right, I've got the camera share icon. Now this particular person is in the project with me. And what I can do is I can click the plus sign to invite them to kind of an interactive session. So if I click on that, the other user is basically prompted saying, Luke wants you to follow his camera. Would you like to? So then I go, okay. And now we're in an interactive kind of session. So let's try and keep this so you can kind of see both things happening at once. So over on the right, I'll have to probably bring that one down a bit for you. We'll use our collapse option there. So on the right here, I'm doing some navigation. And on the left, on a different computer, Revizto, the 3D view is getting driven as we do that. So what's this for? Well, we could be on a phone call to someone and we could say to them, we're really interested in something that's going on the concourse level or something. Let's do a quick camera share together. So you're both inside the Revizto project together. One of you clicks the camera share icon, and now you've got this interactive session. And it could be multiple people. So it could have 10, 15, 20 people, and they could be anywhere. They could be in Australia, they could be overseas, they could be on site with an iPad with a 4G connection. And so we're getting this whole interactive kind of view. Now it supports quite a lot of things, particularly if let's have a look at, for example, our appearance templates. If we apply an appearance template on this end, you can see on the kind of, the other person who's the participant, the appearance gets activated for them as well. And maybe we're talking to them, we want to do a column review. So we activate the column coordination. We're talking about a specific, area where there's a problem. It also supports sectioning. So if I activate a section, we can now see there that the section, is active. Some things that won't exactly support is like if I create an issue right now. So if I create an issue on this side, basically the person who's kind of viewing along with me will not see kind of things like perhaps markups that I'm doing to that view. Now I haven't moved the camera at all, so they're still kind of sitting there. But it does support, those other features around coloring, isolating, maybe for a kind of internal kind of discipline review. We go, look, I'm talking to my mechanical team. Let's look at just the mechanical model together. So we grab that one, we could isolate it. And as I talk to my team in a meeting, we're just looking at the mechanical design together. Now that's all well and good, but what if the other participant wants to drive? Well, at the bottom of the screen, there's a request control button. So this person can click request control. And then basically on the other side over here, it says the other person's requesting control. And then you kind of click the arrow to kind of accept that request. And then, kind of this person becomes the driver of the session. And so you can pass control between a few different Revizto users with that feature. Now, what you may want to do is know how to get out of this. So at the bottom of the screen, you've got your kind of white bar. So if you click on that one, that clears the camera share session because there's only 2 participants. But again, this user over here could initiate it by clicking camera share. He wants to share with Luke Johnson, so he clicks that. We accept. And now this person, he's the one who initiated it. So that person is kind of driving now. So it's quite a powerful feature. Now, what it doesn't do is it doesn't do things like audio kind of sharing. So it's not like going to replace Teams essentially, but it is better performance than a Teams. So what do I mean by that? Is it's not sending like screenshots through the web, which would be slow. It's just kind of sending some camera settings to your machine, so it's fast. So the actual camera share experience is smoother and faster than trying to do like a Zoom or a Teams, because it's just sending the settings and then your computer's doing the job of actually drawing the view. So yeah, camera share is back. Quite a few people were interested in having that back. So that's really quite exciting. It's great to see. All right, let's have a bit of a look at some enhancements to Clash Automation. Now, just before I dive in there, you should all feel free to ask questions. So we do have a Q&A panel with this particular webinar running. So I should have said this at the beginning, but you're welcome to kind of click the Q&A and start writing some questions directly in there. And I noticed some coming through on the chat. So what we'll do is we will cover off on all those questions kind of at the end, once we've gone through all of our updates. All right, great. So let's have a look at Clash Automation and just some things that have been tweaked or changed in there. So if I go to Clash Automation right now, one of the main things that we have released with 5.9.1 is ignore rules. Now, if you've been any of my implementation sessions to date, Revizto didn't have the ability to kind of ignore certain objects. So we had to build a system ourselves for the ignoring of objects. And the way that we built it originally was you would have basically a clash test set, and that would do something like this, where it would search within a particular discipline, like within hydraulic, and it would remove objects that are in an exclusion search set. So that was kind of okay, but it was a little bit non-transparent, and it was a little bit harder to customize than what we're about to show you. So let's take this test example here, the steel coordination. I'm just going to right click and duplicate it. And this is now, we've released 5.9, we've got ignore rules. So I'm just going to slightly rename this one. So this is with ignore rules active in that one. So let's talk through how to put in the ignore rules. You can see the settings there on the right. So we've got our selection settings, so which disciplines we are clashing, and then we've got ignore clashes. So this panel here is kind of brand new. So I click the settings there to open up the ignore rules. Now we've got a few kind of blanket rules at the top. Ignore duplicates. If you hover there, it says if a clashing object includes something that's fully identical in another clashing object, it's not treated as a clash. Okay. So that's firstly the kind of concept of, let's say I've got a wall in my model, I'm the architect, it's identical to a wall in the structural model, like literally identical in shape and size, then I don't want to see that as a clash because they are essentially the same object, right? Just represented in two different models. So ignore duplicates in general, I would say would be turned on unless you've got some really strict BIM management rules where all of your disciplines don't have any kind of overlapping or similar objects. Ignore if both objects are in the same model. So that's kind of the ignore rule where you don't want to do self-clashing or self-coordination. So there's a case where I've got a mechanical model and I do a clash detection against myself to find out if I've got a coordination problem within my discipline. Now, if I was going to do that self-coordination, I'd obviously want this option off, because I want to find the clashes between the same model. But if we're doing a pure discipline versus discipline kind of coordination, where I want to find the mechanical clashes just versus hydraulic, that's kind of when I would turn it on. So I'm only wanting to find clashes if the two elements are in different models. Ignore these ones all here are when you want to ignore clashes with kind of spatial elements. So as you know, Revizto supports, rooms, areas, and spaces. So they're all kind of Revit special objects, aren't they? Revit room, Revit area, Revit spaces. So when you don't want to clash with them is when, they're not important for coordination. When you do want to clash with them is when, you've modeled rooms in as a clearance zone or something. And so that's when you would untick this. But for now, let's assume we don't want to clash against the spatial objects. And then the zones geometry is a bit more special. because that's using the Revizto zones feature. So they can be, of course, modeled as a 3D mass or a room or something, and we create a search set for it and set it as a zone. So again, we could ignore that or show it. All right, so now we have three main sections here with our ignore rules. And basically it does either, the top one is kind of find if either of these objects are fitting inside of a search set, then ignore the clash, okay? So to adapt the system that we had earlier, we could just have maybe a project-wide kind of exclusion set like this one. And it's now going to ignore any clash if it appears inside of that search set, if the object appears in that search set. So that's fine, that works quite well. But what if we want to be more focused about our exclusion rules, okay? So in that case, let's say we've got an exclusion rule set for mechanical specifically. So let's do this example. We've got some pipe insulations and some duct insulations and some flex ducts. So I'm now going to, as you can see, as I've selected it, it's opened up in Find Objects. I'm now going to save that as a new set, and I'm going to call that my mech specific exclusions, right? And over here, I've got a spot where all my things are stored. So under Clash kind of main folder, we go okay. So what we've now got is we've got a kind of this super big exclusion set, but we've also got mech specific ones, okay? So when we go into mech coordination, for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to force relinquish that. If you find somebody's editing it and they have it relinquished, you can force relinquish. Obviously, we'll lose the work that they may have done. So under here, we've got our ignore rules, and we're going to settings. And now you've got to have this idea of object A, object B in mind, okay? So in our selection set, object A is anything from the left-hand side column, and the object B is anything there from the right-hand side column, okay? So if we go over to the ignore clashes, and we've created a mech-specific exclusion set, we would add it here because it's on the A side of the clash equation. So we'd go in here, we'd grab our settings, we'd clash, and it's a mech-specific exclusion, and hit apply, and that's now been added, and we'd probably have all the other options typically on. So now we've done a targeted exclusion or ignore rule for mech that focuses in on that discipline. Now, if you had used the previous method, you may want to wind it back. So you probably have to retool some of your older search sets that had some built-in exclusions and just go back to a discipline selection with these ignore rules. So the advantage of the ignore rules is kind of as we go through clicking on clash tests, we can kind of get a concept around what's getting ignored. Because as we click through, basically should give us some bits of detail around what search sets are getting ignored there in the ignore clashes. Whereas before, it was kind of concealed away within the search sets area. So yeah, just one last look at that. We've got the ignore clashes. We've talked through all of these rules up here. We can apply the kind of ignore or exclusion rules across both sides, as in if either object A or object B is within this search set, ignore it. Or we can apply it, on the A side or the B side. Now we can actually do it this way. Rather than building kind of a combined one, I could have even come in here and selected specifically the search sets that I've created. So if you really wanted to give the maximum kind of visibility for your team to see what's going on, that's when you might do that method, because you can now clearly see these are the three kind of categories or whatever that we're excluding from our clash detection. All right, so that was our ignore rules. Now, the other kind of enhancements that have come in the recent point releases have been kind of improvements to point cloud clashing. So particularly around what it visually looks like. So I'm just going to rerun a point cloud clash, and I'll pull this model over for you to have a look at. Now, if we're running a big point cloud kind of clash detection, you know, against a lot of maybe a whole building, a whole verification, you know, that could take some time. But the real kind of focus with the point cloud, you know, enhancement is that it kind of identifies zones or points where the clashes are occurring. So this particular case, the search sets are probably really big, and that's kind of why it's taking its time there to find them. So we've got, you know, AR in a particular zone versus our RCS. So if we look at our search sets that are built together there, let's have a look at that. The AR kind of zone that we were looking at, these objects, and the RCS, if we isolate those, those. So the you know, it's a decently dense point cloud, which is why it's taken some time. So we will run it, but we might kind of come back to it once the results are done, and we'll show you what that looks like. All right. A couple of other things inside a Revizto viewer is the share UI. So if we go to share, what you'll notice is some visual enhancements here, and particularly looking at the status column. So this didn't used to be here. It used to just be, you know, username and kind of their role. Whereas now we can see if their license is actually active or not. So the advantage there is if somebody has deactivated their license or their guest license has been lost or something, we'll clearly see there in the status column that person doesn't have access because they don't have a license, right? So the most common scenario is someone had their own license, you invited them as a guest and everything was working fine, and then they lost their own license somehow. It was deactivated or reallocated, and now they can no longer act as a guest, and they would kind of appear as suspended in your space and they wouldn't have access anymore. So the way to solve that kind of problem is either you go to that person, you could contact them here, you can see their email address and say, look, you need to get your own license reactivated so you can come back as a guest here, or you could give them one of yours. You know, if you've got sufficient licenses in your pool and contractually it's okay, you could make them a collaborator in your space. So yeah, this column is new. As you know, in the Share UI, you already have things like the ability to view the permissions, and also when you hover on individual points there, it tells you what that individual kind of permission item actually means. All right, kind of following along this theme of license management, we released some web updates recently to allow us to kind of better manage licenses. So let me just pull the web page across for you to have a look. All right, so we're inside the Revizto workspace, and what we want to have a look at is our project roles. Now, this is a brand new kind of user interface here. We've got a list of all the roles in our workspace, how many users are affected by that role, and how many projects are affected by that role. We've got the edit pencil button there to be able to edit it. If we select it, you know, we can make a new role here and basically create a new role kind of based on the previous. If we go into the edit example, this is the same as it used to be. So the best way to duplicate a role is to edit it and then go save as new role. So you still kind of have to go here to duplicate the role. Now, the interesting part is we're able to compare the permission levels between roles, okay? So I've got a number of different roles here that all have the word administrate in it, and I want to figure out what the differences are. So I'm going to click on the compare roles button. So the first one I'm going to load up there is the administrate. we can see the role is listed out, and I'm going to press plus and compare that to the other one here, which is called administrator. And now as I scroll down, I see, oh yeah, that's the same. Oh, wait a minute, that's different, right? So I can see a clear difference. And I'll add another one in, this one. So again, we can see, other differences in those roles. This Revizto administrate allows things to happen that this one didn't. Now, what we might want to do is just show the differences, because at the moment we're kind of seeing where things match. So if I tick the box here, show differences, we can see the main differences between these three roles are, these 3 points. So that's going to help us to manage our roles quite a lot. Now, while we're looking at role management, I guess a couple of tips is when you go to delete a role, you'll be prompted to kind of merge it into another one. So you can see here quite a mess of roles, but we can clean it up. So let's say this one here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and delete that role, and it says you're about to delete it. It's assigned to 9 people across 9 projects. So it's going to have an impact, but I can assign a replacement role. So I'll jump in, go to administrate, press delete, and essentially I've now merged that role, into the other one, and I'm starting to clean up my role list. Cool. All right, so that's some enhancements there on the website. We're continually adding more things there and improving things. We're working on additional filters, particularly around stamps as well. So we'll see those releases in the next weeks, months. All right, just a couple of other improvements. Tekla base point. So as you know, we've got a Tekla structures plugin, which is quite good. It's got the issue tracker capabilities, the ability to export, and so on. Now, in the past, it's been a little bit challenging to get the Tekla base point matching kind of a Revit shared coordinate system, which obviously we need to kind of happen for it to work inside a Revizto environment. But we've solved, some of those issues. So we're now able to basically manage these cases where we've got the Tekla base point. We can give you the exact steps and a video necessary on how to set up those coordinate systems. All right. Now, I just wanted to give you a couple of tips on the Navisworks exporter, because there's been a couple of enhancements there for those using Navisworks still. First one is when you go to export a model to Revizto, in previous kind of releases, we did for a temporary kind of period, we brought in an option to select the links that you want to re-export. So there was kind of a select links button here, and you could choose which ones you want to export. Now that's gone away. The reason it's gone away is because we now check if models have been changed before we upload. So essentially we've improved the algorithm so that we only upload changed models, and we no longer kind of give you the option to select links to export from the Navisworks side. Now the way this would be managed is the way it kind of always has been, which is in your viewpoint list, if you only want to export certain things, you would save a viewpoint called Revizto Export, and then perhaps in your selection tree, you would hide certain things. So if we go over here and, perhaps some objects I don't want to bring across, so I could just grab all those and hide them. And then if in my Revizto export view here, I've set it up such that hide and required is part of the settings, then basically it's only going to export what's visible. So you have to do an update, of course. So that's the way to stop things from uploading to Revizto. Same with Navisworks, same with Revit and other tools, is that we basically set up a Revizto export view to do that. All right, some secrets about what's coming. We're in active development on a SharePoint integration, and it's nearing completion. So as you know, we have a number of integrations already in our docs area here, where we can add, integrations with BIM 360 Box and Procore. We've spoken to key clients. We've scoped out the SharePoint integration, and it will act relatively similar to this, where you connect a SharePoint hub or site or folder to Revizto, and then you're able to do things like send those documents across from this environment. If it's a PDF, you're able to use that send to 2D option to move a PDF over into the 2D workspace, and it's kept in sync. You can mark it up. And the other things that our docs integration already allows is that in the issue tracker, you're able to go and attach from the docs panel. So hypothetically, if you've always got SharePoint active on your projects and you're storing things like commissioning documents, safety documents, etc., you could now attach those documents directly to issues, and they'll update when the SharePoint document updates. Let's say you're doing long format markups. So you've got 200-300 page document, and you're marking it up in SharePoint, and the live document is in SharePoint. You could kind of use the integration to come here in Revizto, and you're able to then browse the entire SharePoint data set and double click and open that long format PDF, kind of work your way through. So that's quite exciting, the SharePoint integration. All right, so what we'll do now is we'll go to some of the questions that we've got. So some of these coming from the chat, and there's one there, I think from Andrew Grady in the Q&A. So right. All right, so let's work through our chat. So are there going to be folders to sort and organize appearance templates similar to search sets? We've certainly heard that feedback, and we have got that added to the roadmap. I can't give you an ETA on that one yet. Is there a keyboard shortcut we can use to minimize, maximize the window? That is a great question. So if I don't know the answer to something, I go over here in the Revizto window, click on the help. We actually have an area here for keyboard shortcuts. In this case, it'd be like the minimize, but it's nothing there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to our kind of help team, and we'll make sure that that particular keyboard shortcut looks like Alt Enter. Yeah, so that's a bit of a full screen. That's not the actual kind of clear the dialogues. So I don't know whether we have that particular option yet. So we'll come back to you on that one in the help. All right. Is there a plan to pop the windows out for use on multiple screens? Certainly, we've heard that feedback as well. Some of the limiting factor is our backend 3D engine, which is not supporting multi-monitor yet, but I believe once that begins to support kind of multi-screen, we'll be able to kind of piggyback onto that and do it. So that's a never say never kind of on that one. Is there a log that shows who has been using the software and when, and who's currently online? Okay, so if I'm inside a project and I want to see who's online, the quickest way now is actually clicking the camera share icon, because then we see who is on the project, inside the project with me right now. Now, interestingly, let me just confirm this, but it used to be a notification where even if someone was kind of logged in through the web, it would let you know. Like camera share is only going to show us people that are logged in to the actual software there. So what about activity? So license activity, I guess, is the other part of that question there. So if we go to our main kind of Revizto help website or Revizto website, if I want to know what's going on with my licenses, I've got a few strategies. I could go to a particular project, and if I open up a particular project, we've got project log, tells us who did what when to the project. We've got project activity, so we can see kind of the number of logins, etc. in there. So that's kind of project scope, telling us what's going on inside the project. If I want to do more of an overview on my users, I could go to user management. And in user management, that's where we have things like last activity date. So it's saying, has this person interacted, in my workspace? And this is the date when it's happened. So if I then wanted to kind of limit this to a project, provided I've got access to user management, which is only admins, by the way, license admins. So if I went down to one particular project, I can see only the people who are actually invited to that project, and I can then sort by last active date. We can see some people who may never have logged in and which ones are using it kind of regularly as well. You can also filter by the last active date in here. So let's say if it was before, 1st of February, so I'm only just seeing then the kind of least active people. Now, what would I do with that information? Potentially, I could deactivate them, but ideally, we would send them an email saying, please check Revizto. We can do it right here from the interface, and saying, get in, use the things that we've set up for you to get the most out of your project. Okay, from Brinda Patel, is there a way to know if the person we're going to invite to the project has their own license or not? Some people don't know. It shows after we send an invite, but it's too late. The short answer is no, we don't give that insight. So what Brinda's asking is, if we're going to add a user and we put in their email address in here. So if I press add users and I want to try and add them as a guest, this is probably the best insight you're going to get. Okay. So if you typically try and bring people in and set them to guest, it just won't allow you to if that person doesn't bring their own license. Okay. So that's probably the answer, I think, for this question. You can load in a bunch of users from a file and then try setting their role to guest at import time. And then you'll clearly see which ones don't have a license. And then if they don't, it's either request them to talk to our sales team to get a license, or you can give them one of yours, if you're contractually set up to do that. All right, from Kevin Golding, in the compare roles list, can we make it alphabetical? I believe it can be sorted just here. So if you just click the kind of column header, it'll sort alphabetically. Similarly, we could sort by users. This shows how many users are affected by a role, most important at the top, and same with projects. How many maximum projects affected by a role. And just from a strategic point of view, this is why it's so important to keep your number of admins down typically. So if I go to license info here, there's obviously a number of administrators. You can actually see that even for licenses where you're kind of not an admin, you can actually see the admins when you go to license info. If we go to user management in this particular case, and if we filter down to administrator role, this is the list here that we want to keep really small, because these people should be trusted. They should know the impact of doing things like archiving projects, deactivating users, and managing roles. Okay, export only changes function. Would it work on Revit too? I don't believe we've brought that to Revit yet. So I think that would be a future enhancement to export only changed models from the Revit environment. How can I delete models from Revizto instead of unloading them? All right, so in Revizto, in the object tree, we can see, kind of all the models that we've loaded up. In this project, there's one kind of super federated model. that has many Revit links to it. Okay, and there's another one over here. Now, the way to manage those would be under Edit, Model Management. What it shows us is a similar list, but it shows us things like who exported it last, when they synced it. Now, the difference between last exported and last synced, an export can happen locally and sit on your machine, whereas a sync is when something's been pushed to the cloud for everybody to see. So if I want to delete things, if I select like a child model here, we've got deletion, and we've got deletion at kind of the parent level as well. So we can delete models kind of all together. Now, the best way to solve those situations is to not export them in the first place, because we really want to set up our export views and our export process to actually not bring data in and then have to kind of delete it. So the best scenario would be not bringing it in to begin with. But if you have no kind of option there, you can certainly come in and click delete, and then you'd have to sync your model, and that would trigger a project version. So you shouldn't kind of panic if you've done it and you want to unwind it, because you could go back to project versions and you could open up the previous version or make it current to kind of roll back to when you had the model that you accidentally deleted. Now, the load unload links is generally better in the sense that maybe we want to see that model sometimes, but maybe it's rare. So let's say it's the design MEP model. We unload it and then we save that as a preset without design MEP. So maybe 90% of the time, I don't want to load that up because I've got all my fabrication models. But then maybe just occasionally, I want to check my design MEP versus my fabrication, and then I could go into my load links and bring it back, load it back into memory. And we could also do that from the selection tree. So an unloaded model appears with an X there. We can right click on it and we can go load models to load it back. All right, same for the clash test, delete instead of archive. So if we go to our clash test area, and if we've got a test there that we want to get rid of, we can select it. Now our options there are delete. And if we go then to show archive tests, we can see a bunch of archived tests, but the one I just deleted is kind of truly gone. So you've got those kind of two options with getting rid of a test. You've got archive and delete at the test level. So you may not have seen that. Perhaps that is on a recent version. So you've got archive there as well. All right. So once you go to compare. Is it possible to create an issue internally, but should not be visible to the public? Yep, so that's the, basically the idea around public and private issues. So if we wanted to set up a proper workflow for that, we should create a specific stamp for it. So let's say we have a stamp category for my company internal issues, okay? And what I'm going to do is under here, I'm going to make all the issues created from that stamp category public no. And this will be internal question. So basically, as I drop that issue, only the person who raised it and the watchers will see it. So typically you would add your immediate team to that kind of stamp folder as watchers. So now as I begin using those issues, internal question, drop that there. Only Luke, Duncan, and Matt can see that issue unless you're a project admin. So a project admin can always see all issues, even private ones, but normal users can only see public issues or the issues that they've been added to like this. And that's all tied into roles as well. So if we go into the information here, one of the options or one of the permissions is the ability to edit issue privacy. So let's go have a look at the administrate role. So you've got view all public issues. So that's the one that lets you see an issue if it's public. And then you've got edit issue visibility. That's the one that lets you switch that public private switch to off kind of thing. So it becomes a private issue. All right, good. So I think we've exhausted most of our questions. Got a few more. What if I turn off public button for an issue? Will it be invisible for others and won't be shown in reports? It will become invisible for others unless they are a watcher. The reporting side is a little bit interesting with that. So with dashboards, you can kind of create an admin level dashboard that gives you sight across public and private issues. So let's have a brief look at that quick question there. So if I make a dashboard in here, one of the options is, do I want to see public issues or do I want to see all issues? So when I make a public issue dashboard, I can make it so all my project can see that, right? So any charts I add there will be filtered down to public issues only. Now, if I go back to my dashboards, make a new dashboard for admins can see this, we could go all issues and only project administrators, or we can select people to kind of see this kind of admin level dashboard. So that's the kind of two modes there, kind of public and private, or just the public issues. All right, cool. So our clash detection has completed here. So we're looking at our clash results. They're grouped together. And if we go into the individual clashes there, what we're looking at here is we're trying to understand how obviously the point cloud and the real model react together. So I'll just clear off some kind of colorization stuff. So you can see here, the key difference to what it did before is that the whole point cloud will kind of get highlighted when it was clashing. Whereas now, sections of the point cloud are getting highlighted where they are clashing with the actual design model, okay? So it's helping us see more clearly what's going on. If we went into visual effects, we can do things like adjust the point size, might even help, clear up that a little further as well. So just keep working our way through some of these results here. It's just showing us areas that are clashing, and it's breaking it down, the point cloud into the clashing section. So the red element is coming from kind of the architectural model, and then kind of this green highlighting is where the point cloud is clashing with that architectural model. So, any kind of verification exercise needs a bit of thinking put into it. What are we scanning? What are we checking against? But, we have the toolkit available now in Revizto to be able to represent, those clashes between a design model and the point cloud. Of course, you can certainly play around with things like your clashing type, particularly clearance and tolerance. So you would definitely look at maybe using a tolerance. Your verification process may support 50 mil tolerance. So then you'd put in a tolerance of 50 mil when we're clashing that laser scan there. All right, so just have one kind of last question for reports. How do we control private issues in reports? So we can go report, add new report. This setting at the top is basically what controls privacy for reports. So if I go only public, it's only going to present on the report public issues. So that would be like public issues only. If I go over here, visible to the author, okay? Now, issues I've been added to that aren't public, I can still see and I can still report. So that's kind of what visible to the author means. And visible to all invited, again, is kind of like this kind of scope around the person. But yeah, I think you're probably, for the most part, you'd be looking at only public or possibly visible to all invited if you want to kind of create this filter. When it says invited, you can share the report. So it's kind of saying Vlad and Duncan both need to have access to the issues for them to appear on this report. So the kind of where that's heading is you could create a MEC report visible to all invited, right? And you would add your entire MEC team under the sharing options, and then you'd get a proper report of public and private issues as long as those team members can all see those issues. Yeah. So this, what we're saying is that this setting here kind of controls the issues that appear on the report. Yeah. All right, cool. So that pretty much finishes our content. We've covered most of the questions. If we've missed anything, feel free to reach out to me direct, luke@revizto.com. And we really appreciate you all attending today, and looking forward to catching up with you again soon. So thanks for coming along.